Amen. Nope. Thank you. Spend the rest of the day unless we finish on the image of the beast, but I'm going to go a long way around the mountain before we get to the nuts and the bolts of the image of the beast. The image of the beast, what I mean by that is the testing period from the midnight cry to the Sunday law, the image of the beast testing period. And we understand and we teach at this time that the time that we're living in is the place where the effect of every vision is fulfilled. And we're understanding that the history that's pointed out is 1989, the time of the end for our history. 9/11, these are the waymarks. The midnight cry, the Sunday law. What's the next primary waymark? Okay, but what marks the close of probation? Okay, this is close of probation. When does the close of probation take place? In Daniel 12:1, Michael stands up, but what happens on planet Earth? The plagues begin at that point in time, but what happens on planet Earth that marks the close of probation? The universal Sunday law. Who said that? You're right, whoever said that. This is the universal Sunday law.
So there's really not that much time between the national and the
Why? Why do you say that? No, there isn't. But I mean, just from this illustration, you can't know that, right?
Well, I can't see that.
Okay, so what's the next waymark? Michael stands up right here at the close of probation.
Oh, the plagues.
The plagues, okay. The plagues is a waymark, but what is the waymark in the plagues that we are looking for? The death decree. Now, let me ask a question, and everyone be honest. Not that any of you would be dishonest, but how many of you understood that the death decree takes place after probation has closed? Raise your hands high. Okay, how many of you didn't know that? Raise your hands high. Okay, it's worth knowing for certainty the death decree takes place after probation closes. Okay, so I'm going to point to some things and then get out of this. This history here is where the effect of every vision takes place, and the Lion of the tribe of Judah has opened to our understanding Ezra 7:9 in connection with Matthew 25 and the parable of the 10 virgins. Those two witnesses brought into this history give you the tools to bring all the stories of the Bible together on this line. Okay? And one of the stories that the Lord is opening up now is that there is a decree here. This is a decree. We will show that to you if we are given time. We all know the Sunday law is a decree. We might intellectually accept the idea that the Patriot Act was a decree, okay? But it was also a decree. So what I'm suggesting is this is a decree, this is a decree, this is a decree, this is a decree, and there's going to be a decree that marks the midnight cry. Okay? And the midnight cry begins the image of the beast testing time. So if you're going to study the image of the beast testing time, then you, at one level, have to understand the decrees. And that's what the book of Esther is about. Okay? The book of Esther is from Xerxes the Great, who's one of the 7 Persian kings that begin with Cyrus and end with Artaxerxes. They begin with the first decree and end with the third decree. And in between the first and third decree, there's a total of 7 Persian kings. And one of those Persian kings is Xerxes the Great. And Xerxes the Great is Esther's husband. So when you go into Esther, you're taking a story that is derived from the 7 Persian kings, which is the 7 thunders. It's a fractal out of the 7 thunders, and the story of Esther is the story of the decrees. It's taken from the 7 Persian kings, where you have the 3 kings as the primary waymarks. It's taken out of that history, and the story of Esther is the story of the decrees. The story of Esther lines up to this history because of the decrees. Okay? So the decrees become a significant subject of Bible prophecy. So now, I'm going to go a long way around the mountain to get back to some of these thoughts. And I'm a loose cannon. I may never get back to these thoughts. So, when are we supposed to quit for lunch? (1:30). Okay. So go to Amos chapter 8. Pardon me? No, it's not too long for me. I just need to know when to stop because I can be too long for you. Amos chapter 8, verse 11. All the prophets are speaking about the end of the world, and it says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord." So what is a famine defined as here? Yeah, if you okay, probably a bad question. Usually, what is it? If I ask the question, "What's a famine?" What will you say? No food. But how is it defined here? No. How is it defined here? Let's read it again. "I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water." So the famine in the Bible isn't simply from a lack of bread, it's also from a lack of water. Right? You see that? Okay. Okay, so there's going to be a famine at the end of the world, but I think we can demonstrate that there's famines at all these waymarks. We used to think it was just at 1, and we thought it was at 2. But the famine here in verse 11, read verse 12 with me. "And they," whoever these people are that don't have any bread or water, "and they shall wander from sea to sea and from north even to east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord and shall not find it." So the word of the Lord here is both bread and water. "In that day shall the fair virgins and the young men faint for thirst. They that swear by the sin of Samaria and say, Thy God, O Dan, liveth, and thy manor of Beersheba liveth. Even they shall fall and never rise again." Who is it that falls and never rises again? Go to Isaiah 28. All the prophets agree with one another. Pardon me? Those that fall backwards. Isaiah 28:13. "But the word of the Lord was unto them precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, and there a little, that they might go and fall backward and be broken and snared and taken." The people that fall and never rise again are the people that reject the methodology of line upon line, which is the latter-rain message. But they're simply one class, right? What do you mean no? What you said no. What do you mean by no? They're one class, right? But there's another class there by inference. There is people that have received the latter-rain message that aren't snared, broken, and taken, and don't fall backward. Yes? Okay. Those people that don't fall and aren't broken, are they lacking bread and water? So what is the famine? It's subjective. All right, the angel comes down out of heaven. He has the hidden manna in his hand. It's up to me to go and take it and eat it, or not to go and take it and eat it. If I don't go and take it, what am I in? I'm in a famine. But if I go and take it, I'm not in a famine. I have all I need, right? Okay, the famine in the Word of God, it's talking about the response of God's people as much as anything else. When Joseph is gathering up the grain for the 7 years of plenty, and then the famine hits for 7 years, during that 7 years when Joseph is distributing the grain that he stored up during the 7 years of famine, was Joseph starving for bread and water? Nope. Okay, he was a class that had partook of the hidden manna at 9/11 and gathered it up so he could distribute it during the time that is a famine to those people that had refused to go and gather the hidden manna. So you may, like I said, we're going a long way around the mountain. Go to Genesis 26. Genesis 26. Okay, in Genesis 26, verse 1, we're talking about a famine here for a minute. It says, "And there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham." Why? What does it mean to you that that second phrase is in that verse? Why doesn't it just say, "And there was a famine in the land, and Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar"? Why is that phrase beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham? Make it a parallel. It's saying you got to consider this famine in the time of Isaac in the context of the famine that took place in the time of Abraham. Yes? And if this is true, then you'll have to have a second witness to uphold this conjecture. Okay? Was there a famine in the time of Abraham? Yes. Go to Genesis 12, verse 10. Genesis 12, verse 10 says, "And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass when he was come near into Egypt," this is verse 11 of Genesis 12, "that he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, Thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee." So the famine in the time of in the time of Abraham, there's a famine, but it's also a time when Abraham lies about his wife. Says, not really a lie, she was his sister at one level, right? But if you go back to Genesis 26, and in verse 7, now this is Isaac. There's a famine in the time of Isaac, according to verse 1, like as there was the famine in the time of Abraham, back there in chapter 12. And what does Isaac do in verse 7? "And the man of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister." Okay, so here's your second witness. These are the same stories. Because the verse 1 is telling you it's a famine like the time of Abraham, and one of the characteristics of the famine of Abraham's history is he went into Egypt and told him that his wife was his sister, and here with Isaac, he tells the same lie. Okay, so you got two witnesses that this is the same story, a parallel story. You with me? So go back to verse 1 of chapter 26. "And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, unto Gerar." Now, if you go back and look at chapter 12, in the story of Abraham, when there was a famine in his story, what did he do? He went into Egypt, okay? But we're going to find that Isaac is told to stay where he's at. Okay, here's the difference between the two stories. They're the same story, but Abraham represents a people that goes to Egypt during the famine. Isaac represents a people that stay where they're told to stay during a famine. Okay, so verse 2 says, and the Lord appeared unto him, this is chapter 26, verse 2, and the Lord appeared unto him, unto Isaac, and said, go not down into Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give on all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. So you have two stories, Abraham and Isaac. They're both stories of a famine. They both are going to lie about their wives being their sisters. But one moves, goes into Egypt, and one stays. Okay, so there is a time when a famine comes when it's okay to go at the Lord's direction, and there's a time when you stay during a time of famine. Now, is verse 1 incorrect? Verse 1 says, and there was a famine in the land. And in spite of there being a famine in the land, what does the rest of the chapter tell us about Isaac? He flourished. He flourished during a time of a famine, right? Verse 3, sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee, for unto thee and unto thy seed will I give all these countries. And if you read down through, Abimelech is going to say, man, the Lord is blessing you unbelievably in a time of a famine. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let's go to the book of Ruth. Go ahead.
Why is Isaac then in the land of the Philistines?
I don't know. Why is Isaac in the land of the Philistines? That's a bigger story. If you go to, this is a very important story. How many times in the Bible are you going to find the word Beersheba? Nope. Nope. She's not listening to the question. If I was going to ask, how many times in the Bible do you see a verse with Dan and Beersheba in it? How many times is that? 10. But how many times in the Bible are you going to find the word Beersheba? 33. 33 times. And what does Beersheba mean? Beer means well. What does Sheba mean? This is the well of the oath. This is the well of the 2520. Okay. This is the well of the covenant. And this story begins, the story of Beersheba begins in chapter 21. And in chapter 21, what's her name? Sarah. Sarah has just had the child Isaac. Okay, and Isaac's born. And what is Hagar and Ishmael doing? They're making fun of that little runt baby, and they're driving Sarah crazy. Sarah can't handle this woman around, and Sarah complains to Abraham, deal with Hagar, and what does the Lord instruct Abraham to do? Cast out the bondwoman. All right, in verse 9 of chapter 21, it says, and Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. All right. So where are you? This is the difficulty of teaching this message. Where are you if Hagar is mocking? This is not the point. The midnight cry. But I will point this to you. In your notes, if you look on page 27, it will give you the references of the mocking in God's Word. And it's always an illustration of the history of the midnight cry. All right? So, okay, you run through those, you will see that when Elijah is going to call fire down out of heaven at Mount Carmel, he's mocking the prophets of Baal and the prophets of the grove. The mocking takes place during the history of the midnight cry. So back to, so you can look at the mocking at your own leisure and see that it's a symbol of this history right here. The mocking takes place. But back to Genesis 21, verse 10. So Hagar's right here, isn't she? She's mocking. Everybody, eyes right. She's right here in this history. She's mocking, okay? If you follow the logic. You haven't tested it, but if you go look the word mock and mocking, it places you in this history. This is where Hagar's at. Then in verse 10 it says, wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out the bondwoman and her son. For the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And verse 11 says this was grievous to Abraham. But when is Ishmael and Hagar cast out? At the Sunday law. This is where the Laodiceans are spewed out of the mouth of the Lord. The mocking precedes this. And then the son of the bondwoman is cast out. Okay? But that's not what I'm wanting you to see here. I'm trying to answer Sister Helen's question, and it devolves around Beersheba. So he cast her out. Okay? And in verse 14, it says, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar. This is when he's casting her out, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Okay, Beersheba, this is the first mention of Beersheba. Who is Hagar a symbol of? We just defined it. You all agreed. Some of you agreed. None of you protested. Laodiceans spewed out of the mouth of the Lord. They're cast out the bondwomen. Okay? So she's the foolish virgins. And in the first reference to the foolish virgins, what are they doing? They are wandering in the wilderness of Beersheba. Now you remember Amos chapter 8. What do the foolish virgins do? They wander from sea to sea and from north even to the east. And they're those that swear by the sin of Samaria and say, thy God, O Dan, liveth, and the way of Beersheba. I forget the last part of the phrase. Okay, Beersheba, they're wandering in the wilderness of Beersheba, and they're not reaping the benefits of what the well of Beersheba provides. The well of Beersheba is the covenant. It's the 25:20. So if you read on, in verse 17, an angel, Gabriel, no doubt, comes and directs Hagar to some water. But then, in verse 22, this is getting more to Sister Helen's point. It says, I'm in chapter 21 of Genesis, verse 22. It says, and it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Who's a chief captain of a host? What do we call him today? A general. Phicol is a term for a general. Abimelech is a term for a king. You got to notice this, because when we return to chapter 26 in the story of Isaac, he's going to have an interaction with Abimelech and Phicol. It can't be the same guys. It's got to be the king of the Philistines in both cases that have their general with them. Okay? So Abraham is in the country of the Philistines. And it came to pass, verse 22, at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's sons, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. Okay, so the Philistine king and his general come and say, hey, we can tell the Lord's blessing you. We want to come into good relationships with you. And Abraham says, okay, I'm willing to do that. But the next thing Abraham does before he enters into this relationship, he says, I want to be clear about something here, though. There's been problems between your guys and our guys. Okay, notice what he says. Verse 25, and Abraham reproved Abimelech because of what? A well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I would not, who hath done this thing, neither didst thou tell me, neither yet I heard of it, but today. Abimelech saying, I didn't know anything about it. But the Philistines have been harassing Abraham over this well of water. And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. So what's associated with this well? The covenant. Okay. And when it comes to the 25:20, in Leviticus 26, one of the terms that's associated with the 25:20 is that it's the curse of his covenant. Okay. This is 25:20 is about his covenant and the breaking of his covenant. So, verse 28, and Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves, and Abimelech said unto Abraham, what meaneth these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 ewe lambs shall thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, the well of the oath. The well of the oath. This word Sheba, keep your finger there and go to Daniel 9:11. Daniel what? Daniel 9:11. Definitely not a coincidence. It says, yea, in verse 11 of Daniel 9, yea, all this Israel has transgressed thy law, even by departing, and that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and that the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. That word oath is Sheba. Okay? And it's both a promise and a curse. The curse of Moses, the oath, depending on how you relate to it. Okay, so the well of Beersheba, back to chapter 21, verse 31, wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear, both of them. And they made a covenant at Beersheba. What happens at Beersheba? What happens at the well of the oath? The covenant is made. Then Abimelech rose, and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines, and Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistine land many days. Okay, it's the Philistine land, but who ultimately is going to, whose land is that going to be? Where is Beersheba? Today, where is Beersheba? What state in Israel is Beersheba found today? Judah. Okay, this is Judah. I don't know if there's a state of Judah in Israel today, but I know that Beersheba still exists, and it's in Judah. Where's Dan? It's in Israel, the northern kingdom. So go to chapter 26. She asks, why are they in the Philistines' land?
Technically, it's not Philistine land, or it was?
Well, it was the Philistines' land when Abraham was there. But what's going to happen to Abraham? He's going to, his descendants, Isaac, is going to have what? A son that inherits the covenant prophets. Who's that son? Jacob. And what's going to happen to Jacob and his sons? They're going to go into Egypt. And then in the time of Moses, what's going to happen? They're going to come out and they're going to take control of the promised land. At this time, the Philistines own that land. Where'd Abraham come from? From Babylon, Ur of the Chaldees. He didn't own any land. He had been promised the land. But at that time he was living. That time the Philistines controlled the land. You with me, Sister Helen?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the history is helping.
Yeah, okay. So in chapter 26, what you have to see here, in verse, this is, you can't miss this. Verse 2. There's a famine in the, verse 1, there's a famine in the land as in the time of Abraham. And then in verse 2 it says, and the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land that I shall tell thee of. Speaking to Isaac. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed will I give all these countries, and will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. What's the oath? Sheba. Okay, verse 4, and I will make thy seed to multiply. So what is the Lord promising Isaac here? He's renewing Abraham's covenant. He's passing it on to Isaac right here in the story of what? The story of Beersheba. And I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of that place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, She is my wife, lest, said he, the men of this place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidst thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, Lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might have lightly have lain with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He that touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Then Isaac sowed in that land, and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great, and went forward, and grew until he became very great. And he had possessions of flocks, and possessions of herd, and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped up and filled them with earth. Now the story is switching back to the story of the wells. Remember, in Abraham, he makes a covenant with Abimelech at the well of Beersheba. But in the time of Isaac, the same similar history is being repeated. And now Isaac's problem is that the Philistines had filled in all those wells that Abraham in the past had dug. And it's going to name some of them for us. It says in verse 16, Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence, and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water, which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley, and found there a well of springing water. And what's your marginal reference say for springing? Living water. Who talks about living water? Jesus. Okay. So they dig out the well of living water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. This well is the well of striving. And they digged another well, and strove for that also. And he called the name of that Sitnah, and the marginal reference for Sitnah is hatred. And he removed from thence and digged another well, and for that they strove not, and he called the name of it Rehoboth, which is spacious. For he said, For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And he went up from thence to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared unto him that same night. The same night what? That he came to Beersheba. And said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee, and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he builded an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants digged a well. Where did they dig a well? In Beersheba. What had happened to that well? That got covered up by the Philistines. Okay, so the well of the covenant runs throughout the scriptures, and outside the scope of where I want to go in terms of teaching the image of the beast. But Abraham represents the Millerites. Isaac represents our day and age. The Millerites understood the 2520, which is the well of Beersheba. But we had to dig that truth out at the end of the world, the same way that Isaac's men had to dig that truth out. But the covenant that was entered into by the Lord with the Millerites, with Millerite Adventism, was the 2520 and the 2300 coming together. You had to have a sanctuary and the host. And the covenant that he's entering into with us here at the end of the world is the covenant of Beersheba, the well of Beersheba, the water of Beersheba. But how many people in Adventism are going to accept the 2520? If you don't accept the 2520, you're not accepting the truth of Beersheba. And what's the truth of Beersheba? It's the well of Sheba. So if you reject that truth, what are you in? You're in a famine. Because you're rejecting the well, the water. Because the famine isn't simply the food, it's also the water. They're rejecting the water. And at 9/11, the water dried up, but that's another story. But it contributes to this. It's perception. If you do not perceive that the hidden manna is actually what you're supposed to take and eat, you don't realize you're going into a famine. When really there's more than you could ever possibly eat available or drink. Okay, so what did I want to say there? I got a little bit sidetracked to put the historical context in to the story of Abram and Isaac. But what I want you to see is that a famine, I don't know the right word for it, it's perception. No, I know where I'm going. I know where we're going. I don't know how to say this part. The famine is perception. An awareness. There is a truth available, but if I do not understand that it's truth and I either ignore it or fight against it, I'm in a famine. But if I appreciate that truth, I've got more than enough to eat. And you got to see that the famine has to do with the Word of God, and therefore it's perception in order to easily see the book of Ruth, where we'll go now. And we're going to the book of Ruth, not in depth, but to make a point about the decrees in order to slide into the story. When did you tell me I had to quit? This is 12:30. Oh yeah, I got plenty of time. In order to go into the story of the image of the beast. Ruth chapter 1 verse 1. Going back there, did I say that before?
Yeah, we started there. And then
Oh, okay. Sorry. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. Okay. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. There's a famine in the land. And maybe he's supposed to go to Egypt like Abraham, but maybe he's supposed to stay there like Isaac. So where does he live in verse 1? Bethlehem, Judah. What does Judah mean?
praise.
Praise and celebration. What does Bethlehem mean? Beth means house.
House of bread.
The house of bread. The house of the celebrated bread. This guy's living where the bread's at. There's a famine in the land, but he's living in Bethlehem, Judah, which is the house of the celebrated bread. So I question whether he is supposed to leave at this point in time. There's no direction for him to live. Sister White says that we are to reason from cause to effect. And the Bible says, by their fruits ye shall know them. Does everyone get both those principles? We need to learn to reason from cause to effect. And by their fruits ye shall know them. And Elimelech here, he's going to go into Moab during this famine. And what's going to happen to him? He's going to die. Oh, we're supposed to reason from cause to effect. And by their fruits you shall know them. Does it sound like he made a right choice? He went there and he died. Okay, verse 2. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion. What's Mahlon and Chilion mean? One means desolation and one means weak and sickly. Okay, they're not good names. What's going to happen to them in Moab? They're going to die. All right, they're going to die. And Chilean Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them of women of Moab. The name of one was Ophrah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. What's 10 years? A testing time. Here's a testing process illustrated. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman was left, and her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. Okay, so go to chapter... Oh, no, it's still in this chapter. They're heading back to, and I'm not going to go through this chapter verse by verse. I'm just going to make a point out of it. So we know that her husband dies at the beginning of the 10 years. Her 2 sons die somewhere towards the end of the 10 years. And that the everlasting gospel is illustrated in her 2 daughters-in-law. Because her 2 daughter-in-laws had the opportunity to either return and join God's people or not, and one rejects that opportunity and Ruth accepts that. So that's the 2 classes of worshipers that were called to come to Bethlehem, Judah. One class says no thanks, the other class follows on. And the other class, Ruth, ends up being married to Boaz. Where is the marriage marked? The marriage is marked primarily here. Now, you're right. The midnight cry has the marriage of what? Cana. But the primary marriage is right here. Isn't it? A Sunday law is typified by October 22nd, 1844. And on October 22nd, 1844, Christ moved into the most holy place. For what purpose? For the marriage. This is where the marriage takes place. He went in to receive a kingdom. Okay, so there is a marriage here that is the primary marriage. Yes, there is a marriage here, the marriage at Cana. But I'm saying the marriage of Ruth and Boaz is here. And without going there, the reason I'm saying it is when Boaz purchases Ruth, how many witnesses are there? There are 10 witnesses. Okay. And who are the 10 witnesses in Bible prophecy, or the number 10? They are the 10 kings. And the 10 kings in Revelation 17 are which kingdom? The 7th kingdom. And the 7th kingdom follows which kingdom? The 6th. And who is the 6th kingdom? The United States. And where does the 6th kingdom end? The 6th kingdom ends right here. This means ends. And the 7th kingdom begins right here. Right? You follow me? And the 7th kingdom is the 10 kings. And when Boaz purchases Ruth at the gate of the city, there are 10 witnesses right here. So this marriage contract that is entered into with Boaz and Ruth takes place at the Sunday law, because you have the 10 kings there marking the arrival of the 7th kingdom. I'm summarizing this down. Does everyone follow the logic? This isn't the point of this, but you have to have certain components of Ruth to get the point that I'm heading to. In chapter 1 still, verse 19. The separation between the 2 Moabite women has taken place. Ruth and Naomi are coming back to Bethlehem. And in verse 19 it says, "So they 2 went until they came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass when they come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them, and they said, Is this Naomi? And she said unto me, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt bitterly with me." What happened there? A name change. Where would we place the name change? What's the name change represent? Covenant. Where would we place it? It has to come before here, right? They're just getting to Bethlehem, and then Ruth's going to glean the fields and ultimately go in at night to Boaz, and then he's going to go to the city gate and arrange the marriage with Ruth. So this history we just read, where her name change takes place, it's either got to be here or here. Is there a covenant name change at 9/11? Yes. Is there a covenant name change at the midnight cry? Yes. On many witnesses. Okay, this is where Moses dies, Joshua takes his place. This is where Aaron dies and Phineas takes his place. This is where Lazarus dies and not Lazarus. This is where Judas is replaced with Matthias. Okay, so you got transitions here. You got name changes. But why do you know it's this waymark where Naomi's name is changed to Mara or Mara? How do you pronounce that? Mara or Mara? What is that name typically in the Old Testament and the New Testament? What is this name actually typically? Mary in the New Testament. What is it in the Old Testament? Miriam. This is Miriam in the Old Testament and Mary in the New Testament. Miriam and Mary mean bitter. Mara means bitter. Okay, so do we have any evidence of Miriam or Mara being marked here? Or Mary? Mary. This is Mary. I don't know if you all know this, but how many know the story of Zacharias and John the Baptist and Mary and Elizabeth? Okay. This is right. Mary is marked here. This is where she comes and visits Elizabeth when Elizabeth is 6 months old.
I'm not saying that it's at 9/11. I actually agree that it's at midnight cry. But why couldn't it be Miriam who dies at 9/11?
From other factors.
Okay.
From other factors. This is just the beginning of that. Good question. We got Miriam marked back here, so she's asking why can't we put Mara back here? We're putting her here for a couple other points. You see why she has to go there. Verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. When's the barley harvest?
In the spring.
In the spring. What's the first fruits offering took place when? What day of the month? The 16th day of the month, right? Passover's on the 14th. Feast of Unleavened Bread begins on the 15th. The first fruit offering's on the 16th. And the first fruit offering in the spring feast was the barley offering because it was coming to fruition first. So when does the first fruit offering take place in this history? Sunday law. Sunday law. So the barley that's being gathered has to be, if you're going to give a first fruit offering here at the Sunday law, then you have to gather that barley in advance, right? Okay. So she's gathering the barley before the Sunday law. Okay. You see that? Okay, so she goes in chapter 2. She begins to glean, and I'm not seeing the verse I'm looking for, but. Okay, they have the relationship of her gathering in this history. Boaz learns to appreciate it. He marries her here. You know that story, right? Let me just put that in the record. Chapter 4. and verse... I'm looking for in this verse where the 10 witnesses are so that we can put that in the record. Verse 2, does it say it? Yep. I read over that one. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here," and they sat down. In verse 11 it says, "And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. The Lord make this woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem." Okay, so let's add a line here. Same way marks, but this is dealing with the 14th, which is Passover, the 15th, and the 16th, when the first fruit offering is to take place.
So those 10 witnesses are represent like the same 10 kings?
The 10 witnesses are the 10 kings. They're Haman's 10 sons. They're the 10 enemies of Psalm 83. They're the 10-fold division of pagan Rome. They're all the 10s. They're the 10 toes of Daniel 2. They're the 10 cities of Genesis 15. They're the 10 cities of Ezekiel 30. They're the 10 merchants of Ezekiel 27, I think. They are the seventh kingdom of Bible prophecy. They are the United Nations. So go to 2 Chronicles, chapter 30 for sure, but maybe chapter 29. 2 Chronicles. Let's start in chapter 29. I'm not sure that I have to put chapter 29, verse 17. Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the altar, so they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days, and in the 16th day of the first month they made an end. Does everyone know the story of chapter 29? I'm going to assume that everyone doesn't. Okay? If you go back to chapter 29, verse 1. Hezekiah is a good king, right? He made a mistake towards the end of his life, but he's a good king. And in verse 1, he says, Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. So when he becomes king, what's he going to do? Repair the house of the Lord. Who repairs the house of the Lord? Ezra. Keep your finger there in 2 Chronicles and go to Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58, verse 12. Isaiah 58:12 says, And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generation, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the past to dwell in. God's people at the end of the world are the ones that are going to repair the temple of the Lord, restore the past to dwell in. When does that begin? Who raises up the foundations of many generations? How do you raise up the foundations of many generations? Who said that? What did you say? Line upon line. Every line has a foundational work done in it. As you're teaching line upon line, you're raising up the foundations of every generation. When does this message become present truth? 9/11. Okay, so go back to 2 Chronicles 29, verse 3. He, in the first year of his reign, in his first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. And he brought in the priests and the Levites and gathered them into the east street. So on the first day or on the first month anyway. But when's this all start? We already read in verse 17, began on the first day of the first month. So when it says, he gathered them together in the first month, they were gathered together in the first day of the first month. Who was gathered together? The priests and the Levites. When is the first day of the first month? Well, in the Millerite history, it was April 19th, 1844. When is it in our history? 9/11. Was there a gathering together at 9/11 of the people that were going to rebuild the old waste places and repair the temple of the Lord? Okay, so this is 9/11. Okay, but in verse 17, which we already read, there is a two-step cleansing process, is there not? Yep. How many, for them to clean the temple and get it ready, took how many days? 8 days. And then for them to clean the courtyard, 8 days. So 8 days here and 8 days here. They begin on the first day of the first month. This is 9/11, first day of the first month. Took them 8 days to have the temple sanctified. Another 8 days to have the courtyard ready. So where are they? What's 8 and 8? Beginning at the first day of the month. They're at the 16th. Okay, they're at the Sunday law, or they're at the Feast of First Fruits. Okay, and that's what I'm looking at here. This is Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, 14th, 15th, 16th. But prophets aren't going to disagree with one another. Here, Hezekiah is beginning to work on the first day of the first month, which is 9/11. And it's a twofold cleansing. 8 days and 8 days brings you to the 16th day. When are you supposed to keep the Passover? On the 14th. How long did it take him to cleanse the sanctuary and the courtyard? So what day of the month are they at? They're at the 16th day of the month. When are they supposed to keep Passover? Can they do it? No, they can't do it. For Passover's already passed. They could not get the temple ready in time to have a Passover. Right? You see it? So now we'll go to chapter 30. You'll get the point in a minute if you don't already know this point. There's much more to say about chapter 29. But in chapter 30, verse 1, it says, And Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel. For the king had taken counsel, and his princes and all the congregation in Jerusalem, to keep the Passover in the second month. You're supposed to keep the Passover in the first month, right? So they're going to do it on the 14th day of the second month instead of the 14th day of the first month. You see that? And now when it comes to the Passover, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, all these feasts of the Lord, is it okay to push them off a month? Only with one. With one there is. It's okay to have Passover in the second month. Go to Numbers chapter 9. Numbers chapter 9. Verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they were come up out of the land of Egypt, saying, Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. That's the 14th day of the first month. In the 14th day of this month, even ye shall keep it at his appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof, shall you keep it. And Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, at even in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel. Now follow this. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man. How many people were in the wilderness, do they estimate? 1 million? Sometimes I've heard 2 million. Did you say 6 million? Okay, let's just go with 1 million to take the lower level. If you have 1 million people living in San Bernardino, in a camp in San Bernardino, how many people are dying a day? Some. Okay, every day, if you got 1 million, there's some dying of natural causes. There's some reason, right? So somebody there is going to be handling a dead body on a daily basis. Okay, and these guys had handled a dead body, so they couldn't keep the Passover. And they came to Moses and said, "We're defiled. We're not supposed to enter into any kind of feast keeping on the Passover when we've been defiled by touching a dead body." Because when you're defiled, you got to be cleansed for 7 days. So what do we do, Moses? Okay, that's what's going on here. Verse 6. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, We are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of the Lord in his appointed season among the children of Israel? And Moses said unto them, Stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, and the Lord's going to throw in a second option, not just dead body here. You've got to catch the second option. Dead body, or be in a journey afar off, like maybe to Moab. Yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord. The 14th day of the second month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean, and is not on a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be, forbeareth means decide not to keep the Passover. If you have no excuse not to keep it, and you decide not to, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not an offering of the Lord in his appointed season, and that man shall bear his sin. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto the Lord according to the ordinance of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance, both for a stranger and for him that was born in the land. So a second Passover is okay in the second month. For what reasons? There's 2 reasons. If traveling afar off, and a dead body. But who brought this question up to Moses? Guys that had touched a dead body. But no one came to Moses and said, Hey, we've been on a long trip. Right? That's not in this story. But the Lord tells Moses, you can include this one in here too. But you know that no one was on a long trip here. How do you know that? Because of the rest of Numbers 9. Numbers 9 says, And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. When was the tabernacle reared up? First day of the first month. The tabernacle is reared up. Okay? Now, other passages of scriptures will tell you the tabernacle is reared up on the first day of the first month. This is just referencing on the day that it was reared up. But the scriptures tell you it was reared up at 9/11. Okay? And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony, and even there was upon the tabernacle, as it were, the appearance of fire until the morning. So it was always, the cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then after that the children of Israel journeyed, and in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents. At the commandment of the Lord, the children of Israel journeyed, and at the commandment of the Lord they pitched. As long as the cloud abode upon the tabernacle, they rested in their tents. And when the cloud tarried long upon the tabernacle many days, then the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and journeyed not. And so it was, when the cloud was a few days upon the tabernacle, according to the commandment of the Lord, they abode in their tents, and according to the commandment of the Lord, they journeyed. And so it was, when the cloud abode from even unto morning, and that the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they journeyed, whether it was by day or by night. That the cloud was taken up, they journeyed. or whether it were 2 days or a month or a year, that the cloud tarried upon the tabernacle, remaining thereon. The children of Israel abode in their tents and journeyed not, but when it was taken up, they journeyed. And at the commandment of the Lord, they rested in their tents, and at the commandment of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the commandment of the Lord by the hand of Moses. So they were going to keep the Passover in Numbers chapter 9 on the first day, or on the 14th day of the first month. And the tabernacle was there, so where was the cloud? It was there. It had to be there. If it wasn't there, they couldn't keep the Passover because they were journeying. The tabernacle would have been... Okay, so you know the cloud was there in the tabernacle in Numbers chapter 9 if they're going to keep the Passover, right? So these guys that came to him and said, we couldn't keep the Passover because we were defiled by touching dead bodies, that was the only valid excuse, right? They couldn't have been on a long journey because the cloud was there in the tabernacle, and when the cloud's there, you can't journey. You follow me? Okay, so did you notice how redundant that was, the last part of chapter 9? It seems like the Lord was really trying to emphasize something. That when the cloud's on the tabernacle, you don't move, and when the cloud moves, you move. Okay, 9/11, there's an angel that comes down out of heaven in Revelation 18. But who typifies that angel? What angel typifies the angel of Revelation 18? Well, there's a couple. Revelation 10. Okay, and so go to Revelation 10:1. We mentioned this last night. Revelation 10:1. This is Millerite history. Primarily Millerite history. And it says in verse 1, and I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven. When did this angel come down from heaven in Millerite history? On August 11th, 1840. Why? What historical event marked his descent? Yeah, the restraint of Islam. The restraint of Islam. So it's typifying the angel of Revelation 18 that comes down at the end of the world when Islam is restrained. So back to verse 1, it says, and I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a what? A cloud. So what happens on the first day of the first month when Islam is restrained at 9/11? There's a cloud that comes down. And what's happening here? The tabernacle is being set up and the cloud is coming down. Okay? So in the Millerite history, here at the Sunday law, the door closes at the Sunday law. Where did the door close in Millerite history? October 22nd, 1844. And what happened on October 22nd, 1844 in terms of the cloud? Go to Daniel 7:13. Daniel 7:13 says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. So what happened on October 22nd, 1844? The cloud moved. It moved from the holy place to the most holy place. So the cloud comes down here on August 11th, 1840, and it moves here on October 22nd, 1844. So what happens to God's people in this history? They're supposed to stay in their tents. Okay, they're supposed to stay in their tents. Now, the issue is, part of the issue that we're dealing with here is a second Passover. Did you want to say something? Okay. So go back to 2 Chronicles. Chapter 30. Verse 5. Okay, verse 2, Hezekiah's taking counsel. It's the 16th of the first month, and he gets counsel saying it's okay to have a second Passover. in the second month. In verse 3, we'll go to verse 3. For they could not keep it at that time, because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, neither had the people gathered themselves together in Jerusalem, and the thing pleased the king and all the congregation. So now Hezekiah is going to go ahead and hold a Passover, but he's going to do it in the second month. And in verse 5 it says, so they established a decree to make a proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem, for they had not done it of a long time. It's in such sort as it was written. So the post went from the letters from the king and his princes throughout all the land of Israel and Judah, according to the commandment of the king. Okay. They're going to have a second Passover on the second month, okay, on the 14th day of the second month. What I want you to see is that there's a decree here to call all of Israel, the northern and the southern kingdom, to come to the second Passover. You see that? And the decree is to go from Beersheba to Dan. You seen that in verse 5? Now, Sister Kathy, how many times do you see Dan and Beersheba in the scriptures? 10 times, okay? And what does the symbol Dan to Beersheba, Beersheba to Dan represent? You know this one? It represents what? Yes, but we forgot. I think we have this in our notes. Pardon me? It's pretty much covenant history. Nice guess. Not quite accurate enough to qualify. Let's see if we have this in our notes. I think we do. We'll put this in the record. The two sticks. Where did you find that? Okay. It's in here, I think. It's the joining of the two sticks. Page 27. Where? Nope. I'm looking for the joining of the two sticks, but I'm looking for the references of Dan and Beersheba. Okay, I will tell them to you. Go to Judges 20, verse 1. There are 10 references to Dan to Beersheba. Judges 20, verse 1 is the first reference. You have somebody have a computer here? 20, verse 1. Whoever has a computer, you can help out. If you type in Dan and Beersheba, it'll give us the 10 listings, and you can guide us through. In verse 1 of Judges chapter 20, the first reference to Dan to Beersheba says, Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead unto the Lord at Mizpah. So what does Dan to Beersheba represent here? Gathering together of all of Israel, the northern and the southern kingdom, into unity. Okay, so what I'm claiming is that the two sticks come together from the midnight cry to they're fully joined at the Sunday law, but the calling begins at the midnight cry. It's in this history that the 11th hour workers are prepared to stand faithfully at the Sunday law, and I'm claiming that the expression Dan to Beersheba represents this history. It's a symbol of where the two sticks are being joined. And the first argument along that line is the rule of first mention in Judges 20 verses 1, is that Dan to Beersheba represents the gathering together of all Israel. Who has their computer running? 1 Samuel 3:20. But before you get to 1 Samuel 3:20, go to 1 Samuel 3, verse 1. 1 Samuel 3:1. It says, "And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision." What does that mean? The spirit of prophecy was silent in that history. The Lord's about to restore the spirit of prophecy, but it's making sure the first thing we see in 1 Samuel chapter 3 is that the spirit of prophecy, due to the sins of Eli and Hophni and Phinehas, it had ceased, just as it did in Adventism in 1915. Had Adventism been faithful from 1915 onward, there would still be a living revelation of the spirit of prophecy in the church. But it had shut down in the time of Eli and Hophni and Phinehas. Verse 1 tells us this. And then in verse 20, it says, "And all Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord." In this history here, if Dan to Beersheba represents the history of the midnight cry to the Sunday law, and it does, the history when the two sticks are being brought together, then the spirit of prophecy is revived in this history. Okay. And there's other lines of prophecy that prove this. There's other witnesses to this. Let's put it that way. Next reference, the numbering. 2 Samuel 3:10. 2 Samuel 3:10. Okay, this takes a little bit of this is a very good story in this history, but it takes a little bit of time to explain this. Abner has been supporting Saul's son, and David is now king, but Saul's son, and he is mentioned, his name is Ishbosheth in verse 7. Okay, Ishbosheth is Saul's son. He, by right, is taking over Saul's kingdom, although the Bible doesn't mark him as the king. The Bible marks that David has already been anointed. And you have to see that what Ishbosheth, who's the strength of Ishbosheth in this story, is Saul's former general. Who's Saul's former general? Abner, right? You see it right here in verse 7. "And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizbah, the daughter of Ai, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, Wherefore hast thou gone into my father's concubine?" So in this story, you have David now, the king that has been anointed. You have Saul's son, who's still holding on to some of Saul's kingdom through the military genius of Abner. And Ishbosheth, Saul's son, is foolish enough to accuse Abner of having an unlawful relationship with Saul's concubine. And it so irritates Abner that he says, "Forget you, I'm going to turn your kingdom over to David." All right? That's the story if you read it in here, what's going on. And you have to see that, because in this history here, it's about the unlawful relationship that is the image of the beast. Okay? This is an accusation of Saul's son towards Abner that produces the translation of the kingdom of Saul into the kingdom of David. It's the transition, and it takes place with an argument about an unlawful relationship. And you can't even determine from here whether it actually happened or Ishbosheth was just being stupid for saying it. So, verse 7, and Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizbah, the daughter of Ai. And Ishmael said to Abner, wherefore hast thou gone into my father's concubine? Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul by thy father, to his brethren and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David? That thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman? So do God to Abner and more also, except as the Lord has sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. So, from Dan to Beersheba, what's happening in this story? There's an argument here over an unlawful relationship, but what's getting set up here? The kingdom of David. And the kingdom of David, what do we call that in Adventism? The church triumphant. This is the church triumphant. And the church triumphant consists of both sticks, because the two sticks are joined right here. Okay, from Dan to Beersheba is about the joining of the two sticks, and it's giving us the history of how these two sticks come together during the time of the church triumphant. Another one. This one I think is the numbering. And this is twice referenced in the scriptures when we say 10. Go ahead.
So you're saying that at the midnight cry, that's where the throne of David is being set up. But isn't the church triumphant at the Sunday represented by Solomon?
I'm saying yes. Solomon is an illustration of the church triumphant, and David's kingdom as a church triumphant is set up right here. But David's kingdom is marked as an escalating development. Here, David is anointed the first time. How many times is David anointed? I heard 4 and I heard 3. I heard more 3s than 4s. How many say 3? How many say 4? Okay, there's 4 times. Okay, so David is anointed here the first time. And what happens to Saul at that time? An evil spirit takes control of Saul. And so he's being passed by here, but he's still alive. He's going to be alive until he goes to the Witch of Endor with spiritual formation at 9/11. But David's anointed again here at 9/11. Who anoints him there? Judah. But when he gets anointed the third time, who anoints him here? Israel. Okay, so when he gets anointed here, who anoints him in the story? He anoints himself. He anoints himself here, and he changes his garments. He eats bread. He anoints himself. There's like 3 covenant markers here. So David is anointed the 4th time. This is the church triumphant. But his kingdom is set up progressively. And the last part of it is the translation from the kingdom of Saul to the kingdom of David in this history. And the story we just read, the translation is accomplished by the foolish Ishobeth accusing Abner of an unlawful relationship right in this history. And Abner says, okay, I'm going to translate Saul's kingdom to David. That's right here.
So you're doing the line of David, not the line of the 3 kings. When you say that...
Oh, yeah, it's a different line. It's a different line, yeah. You don't have no problem with that, though, right? Yeah.
Who did you say anointed him in 1989?
Samuel.
That was Samuel, right?
Yep. And immediately, an evil spirit began to harass Saul. And what did Saul do? What did they do for Saul? No, but what did they do for Saul when the evil... They hired someone to play music. So in this history from here to here, what do you have? You have a sound of music because of what? Because the image is down here. From here to here. Okay, from here to here, from 1989 to 9/11, you have Saul. He's causing a shaking, isn't he? He's throwing a spear at David because he hates David. And the only thing that soothes David Or Saul is David's music. So what do you have in this history? You have a shaking and a noise. David's harp is a noise. Saul's activity is a shaking. What is that? That's the first message of Ezekiel 37. There is a shaking and a noise, and the bones come together, and the flesh and the sinew. But here, on the first day of the first month, in Ezekiel 29, verse 21, the horn of Israel begins to bud out. Okay. And the horn of Israel is the horn of David. Anyway, let's close here and come back to this after lunch. We haven't forgotten Ruth. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the wonderful lines that you are opening to our understanding, but we are overwhelmed with the amount of light. It's definitely impossible for us as human beings to grasp all this. We need your help to put it in place. And we thank you that you're giving us a time of peace and grace that we can attempt this work. We ask a blessing upon the remaining of this day that we can get some more pieces put together in this puzzle. And we thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name, amen.